I've got about 6 o'clock. If you want, we can kind of get started. First off, I'm going to thank you for coming downtown Bellbrook for the community forum tonight. We haven't done this often, but with the ARPA money, it makes sense to get citizen input on how we're going to best spend the money. Tonight's going to be a little presentation by our city manager on some of the requirements and some of the allowable permissible uses for the ARPA money. Then we'll allow some input from the citizens, give us some ideas. We'll try to put a list together and kind of keep a fluid discussion going. And also, just like when they came out with the CARES Act money, there were very few rules written early on, and now I think for the ARPA money, I think the frequently asked questions totals about 24 pages. There's always more information coming out as far as what the uses are, but again, primarily infrastructure, and then also for some of the negative impacts of the pandemic. So with that introduction, I'll turn over to Rob right now. He's got a PowerPoint, and then he'll kind of lead our discussion.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. We look forward to hearing what you have to say. I thought we'd start just by, and this is a very, very, very brief, like 50,000 foot view of the local fiscal recovery under the American Rescue Plan Act. There's a resource on here, a website, if somebody's interested in reading all the volumes of rules regarding it. The Treasury's website has that, and I'll make sure to provide that for you. So what we're dealing with is actually money that is provided through the American Rescue Plan Act, and it's called the State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds, but ARP is easier to say, so that's what we're going with. So the basics of this is that it provided $350 billion for state, local, territorial, and tribal governments to respond to the COVID-19 emergency for the purpose of bringing jobs back. The direct recipients from the federal government was the states and the District of Columbia, $195.3 billion. The counties throughout the country received $65.1 billion. The metropolitan cities received $45.6 billion. And the definition of a metropolitan community is defined by the Community Development Block Grant. Basically, it's communities of 50,000 or more, or an area that is designated as the local hub for a regional population, regardless of the population. Tribal governments, $20 billion, and the territories, $4.5 billion. The indirect recipients received non-entitlement units funds of $19.5 billion. And the City of Bellbrook, most municipalities, townships, and organizations throughout the country are actually non-entitlement units. It doesn't mean that you're not, it just means, based on the definition from the allocations, it doesn't mean that we're not entitled to the money, it's just not entitled for a direct recipient allocation. The basics of it as under the funding objectives, they include support public health response, replace public sector loss of revenue, water and sewer infrastructure, also stormwater infrastructure, address negative economic impacts, premium pay for essential workers, and broadband infrastructure. If you want to dig into the technicalities of the rules and what the guidelines are that we have to follow, the source is treasury.gov/SLFRP, State and Local Fiscal Recovery Plan, SLFRP. So our opportunities, considering what we have jurisdiction responsibilities over under all of those things, include infrastructure, which would include managing and treating stormwater or subsurface drainage water, maintenance and repair of aged surface and transportation infrastructure, or streets, sidewalks, bridges, etc., affected by loss of public sector revenue, establishment of programs under services to invest in necessary improvements to our infrastructures, including projects that address the impacts of climate change, and far-reaching negative economic impacts of the pandemic, which would include replacing lost public sector revenue, supporting small local businesses, and assistance to workers and families. Pretty broad categories, but again, that's the purpose of drilling down in listening sessions like this. The area funding here, just in our direct area, the state of Ohio received $5.3 billion. Greene County received $32.8 million. Sugar Creek Township received $883,051. They received a little bit more than we did. We received $769,291 for a total that can affect and flowing to our area of a little more than $5.4 billion. So that's that's kind of a just direct area. Regionally expanding that out a little bit further, if you're interested. Those are all in order of the jurisdictions within Greene County listed at top in order of the awarded amount. Of course, Greene County being the top award. City of Fairborn received 6.8, Beaver Creek 5 million. Then you can see Xenia, then Sugar Creek Township. Those are the top 5, and then gets into Bath Township, and then us, the City of Bellbrook. Just for some comparison outside and directly adjacent to, you see the City of Centerville and comparison of what they received. Also, Washington Township, City of Kettering, City of Dayton was the largest recipient in this region, and then Montgomery County. So that, again, our sources off of that website and also information throughout. So let's get into ideas around that. As you know, the City Council discussed during the capital budget discussion last year some priorities that they've heard from the residents regarding capital projects. And a lot of that stems around stormwater management, our watershed management, and improvements to that type of infrastructure. So we've identified some key things already based on the already received allocation. But we have the other half of that allocation coming this year, and I know council was focused on wanting to hear from the community and have this listening session to see areas within those two categories that we can affect and address what would be important to the community. So this is an open discussion, and that's it for the presentation. So the rest of it is just dialogue and listening to the ideas that come from the audience, and of course information from council members. I'm sure some of them may have something to say with some residents, constituents that they've spoken to, and see if they have priorities as well. I'll start taking some notes. I'll start off with a couple of people that weren't able to be here. There was a gentleman that lives off Maxwell. He talked about surface water and storm runoff was a concern, and he was hoping that was addressed. We also have information from a business owner at Dots Market and that whole area back there. They had some significant flooding due to some runoff and needing to address some control of that runoff. And he's hoping. Of course, we have here tonight representatives of the Little Miami Watershed Network, and a lot of great information and input on them regarding looking at kind of the same thing and dealing with not only controlling pollution going into, but also managing the runoff into our very, very valuable watershed. And we had one other piece of input that was sent in that indicated that they desired that the money be sent back to the government to avoid an increase in taxes. So, and we certainly appreciate that sentiment, but the unfortunate thing is that if we were to send this money back in, it gets redistributed and reallocated to other entities that would take advantage and use of it. So we certainly appreciate and respect that, trying to contain our costs, but in this particular case, there may not be a good advantage in doing that. So with that, who wants to jump in? Mr. Buckler.
You want to have him come and take the podium? And
You certainly can, if you'd like to. That way we can hear you, and it is recorded.
Come on.
Yep, that'd be great.
just state your name and address.
Yeah. My name's Dave Buckle. I live at 126 Lower Hillside Drive. Lower Hillside Drive, and you have to use my hands and place my overhead. If you look at the street very closely, more than just casually driving it, it actually slants down this direction from Washington Mill, this direction from Hess Road. Then we have additional drainage coming in off of Ryder Court, and the neighbors say, and I have every reason to believe them, additional drainage, they said once the Dollar General went in. And they're basing that on the amount of flood waters in their front yards near the end, not where it's deep, but near the end of Hess Road and Lower Hillside Drive, which is new additional runoff and flooding. So we have water coming in from those ends. Now, people don't think this, and I certainly didn't think it, because you want to think that stormwater runoff conforms to the street in front of your house. It doesn't. It flows with the ground, it goes where it wants. On Bellard Circle, and if you stand on the street and look, you'll see this, but I've seen this on maps since how I first became aware of it. So if you're standing at Bellard Circle at the, what I'm going to call the far end, near closest to the city limit, that end of the street, it actually, again, it slants down this direction, and then Bellard Circle at Washington Mill, right across from the playfield, slants down. So the house, it's not really a cul-de-sac, but kind of a half turnaround. The house there is actually at the lowest peak, at the lowest point. Now, the problem is we're going to have an extreme flood. It's going to happen, and I think most of America agrees. Weather patterns have changed. Why? You can argue over that, but it's a fact, and we've seen it. So when you have additional, you want to get rid of the water in front of you. That's just common sense. But then you would like to mitigate the additional water coming in from new development, new areas. So there's going to be a point when Bellard Circle floods. Houses will be flooded out on Bellard Circle. They don't think it will ever happen, but it's going to happen. That flood water is going to come across the backyards of my neighbors, not across my yard. It's going to come across his backyard, some other backyards, and that flood water is going to seek out the lowest point, which is on Lower Hillside Drive. So, make a long story short, what I'd like to see, because this infrastructure went in 1950, seriously, and believe it or not, I have a map in my house of Bellbrook's development plan for that plat from 1950. It's there. Someone saved it, and I got it. So, but Bellbrook was a village. We were operating out of people's homes. Who knows what Greene County was? We got a commissioner with us tonight. Greene County is not the county it was today, and standards were very different. It was 1950. So it's not, it's not today. And I don't think anyone seriously questions that if it were to go in today that it would meet construction standards. I know that it won't. I've talked to the engineer. I like the engineer you got. I really do. And I've talked to him about the slant of the streets. He's told me his ideas about putting in additional, I don't know what to call it, pipes under the ground, is what you call it. Additional pipes carry additional drainage. I think it's a wonderful idea. I mean, I cannot say enough good things about that idea. What I'd like to see, though, is an awareness of other drainage. I don't want to see people on Bellary Circle suffer a surprise, and it's going to be a surprise because they really think they're high and dry, and those homes aren't. And I can give the manager maps. It's a flood map, and it's got each property is color-coded and dotted by flood risk, all up and down, actually for the entire city. But obviously, those two streets. So that's the thing I'd like to see done. Now, I'm going to buzz out because I really shouldn't be here tonight. And my friend and neighbor, Matt, is here. I'm going to put him on the spot. I'd like Matt to talk because Matt suffered, his truck was totaled. He had flooding inside his house.
This was that June 18th storm we had
Yeah.
last summer.
And the thing is, according to the maps, he should have missed the flood. But other neighbors should have gotten it. The neighbor next to me should have had it. They were within an inch. She came into my house in a panic. She woke me up from a slumbering sleep on the sofa that night. And she says, "Do you have any sandbags I can borrow?" And I said, "I've never had anyone ask me that question before." "No, I'm all out of sandbags today." She was in a panic. So when you're asking that question, it's a question based in fear. The people across the street, the Loxes, they had water come up. I thought it was going to get in their house. And Mrs. Lox has been down here a couple of times, and Mrs. Rives had water in her garage. I mean, that water, the only reason it didn't get in more houses is because by some miracle, it stopped raining like midnight that night. I had waders on, I had flood water in my boots, I don't even know where I wore them. So I'm very excited about this opportunity. I think the manager's doing a good job on this, and he hasn't paid me to say that, not yet at least. I think you're doing the right thing with this. I'm sure people are going to come up with a lot of ideas. But if you can create improvement for Bellbrook. That's not what I would call bling, and I'll just leave it at that. But it's going to be permanent. It's generational. It helps people today, helps people tomorrow, helps people long after we're gone. And you did something great.
That's the plan.
But that's it. I'm
you.
done. And Matt's got to come up, or
Hang on, I've got a question.
he's in trouble. Yes, sir.
20 years. That particular storm was completely backwards.
Backward and what?
General park floods and then the community floods.
Yeah,
Park floods flood.
it wasn't. I don't remember that.
So I'm curious if you remember where the water was. Maybe you just knew that.
Well, the lady, I forget her name. I know her face. I know where she lives, and I'm happy to take her there. She's a nice woman. And she lives up by Lower Hillside, but near Hess Road. And she came out, and the floodwaters were knee-high up at her house, which kind of alarmed me because it shouldn't be that high. I know, because it's always flooded there, but never like that. And she swore to me that she could see the water come down her end of the street. She's talking out like Ryder Court. You know, because Ryder Court, you have the sidewalk at Ryder Court and goes up there. And I don't know how that flows down. I truly do not. But that's where she said it was coming from. Now, I would have assumed, but, you know, I used the word assume, and I said it, that's me. But I would have assumed that Washington Mill would have been flooded, and you're telling me it wasn't. And I gotta believe you, but frankly, we were all standing around in the middle of the street down there looking at the water. I'm surprised more houses. I told a neighbor, the one neighbor, I said, if you need someplace dry, come over to our house and sleep. Because I thought for sure they were going to get.
Can you, I would like you to share the name of the lady you're talking about.
I'll have to find it. I'll just go up and knock on her door. I don't remember her name, but I know where she lived, so. Any other question? I see Danny. I love Danny Bennett. I'm your fan club. Okay, I just had to get that in on the record. Okay?
Are you leaving?
See ya. I'll wait for you.
Okay.
Dave, here's a $10 bill.
I won't talk about you then. My name is Matthew Prosser. I've been here 22 years. A lot of flooding over the years, especially in front of my house. I'm the only house that flooded. I'm the house that only flooded. I got a call from Dave Bucklow, and I was headed to Florida on vacation last year. I was in Georgia. He said, your truck's underwater. I was like, my wife's like, well, they might have had some wine on sale. He might have had too much wine or something. But anyways, he sent me a picture, and the water was above my hood of my truck. And my camper in my driveway, it was at the door coming in. So I went through a $75,000 rehab on my house because I had a foot of water in my house, 9 inches in the garage, animals, rescue, the whole nine. It was a total mess. So when you look up our street towards Washington Mill, it's up. You're going uphill. So I guess years ago they said they buried the pipe uphill. You know, there's no drop towards Washington Mill, I guess. So putting additional pipes in and doing something with those drains in that cul-de-sac would help.
We're talking on Lower
You
Hillside
said
again.
they, who's they?
Huh?
You said they buried the pipe up there?
Whoever put the system in, the original drainage plan was put in uphill, I guess, because it don't drain. It don't drain uphill. It's supposed to drain downhill.
You live on Lower Hillside?
Yeah, I'm 2 doors down from
What's your address?
Buckler 152.
Could you explain to people the damage that was done to the interior of your house and the damage that was done to your truck?
Well, they totaled the truck immediately because it was, once it gets in the floorboards or above the foot pedals, it's a total loss. So, and I loved my truck. It's an F-150. Now I'm driving Dodge. So I like Dodge better, I think. So diesel, but we weren't home. So just imagine a foot of water in your house, your truck's underwater, people are walking down the street, water to here, 4 or 5 feet deep. And it's always three. I had a canoe for years, and we'd get the canoe, we'd just go canoeing. So I got rid of the canoe. But anyways, it's 3, 4 feet deep in front of my house in a heavy rain. And when you got snow, ice, or rain, and when it melts, it just, So there's nowhere for the water to go. And I get on the city all the time. They should be out there when we get heavy rain to clean those drains. Sometimes they drive by, sometimes they'll stop, but they throw the stuff up in the yards. But we got to get that water out there. 4 feet of water, it's coming in. So I might be here 10 more. Huh?
This happens often?
Yeah.
3 to 4 feet of water?
Every heavy rain, isn't it, Dave? It floods up into the Locks' yard that way in the cul-de-sac. Yes. There's 2 there and then a main drain in the.
So there's one drain that's just a dry well.
Yeah, and there's always water in it, like that far
That's
down.
not the one you're talking about.
No.
And anyone come down for the tour, come on down.
Now, if this happens again to me, I don't know if they're going to be so FEMA flood. They took care of me. They replaced everything. So that was nice. But you talk about a mess, I would not do that again. Wouldn't want to do that again. So my plan here is to be here about 10 more years, and then we're moving south, probably Tennessee. My wife's grandparents are ill. So we're going to stay. I've been here 22 years. Bellbrook is a great place, and any way you can help, like even for the future residents, even in that cost, it's a flood zone. We're in a floodplain. I pay flood insurance.
It's been a problem area.
If I pay my house off, I would keep paying for flood insurance because it paid off, and But I had a foot of water in my house, and it was a mess. I don't ever want to do that again. But I am really excited with everything that's happened up till now. That there's some funding that we can maybe do something, because that water, you got to get it out there. And then if you get it out there across Worston Mill to the driving range, that's flooded. Have you ever drove by Worston Mill and it's all ducks and
Matt, what is the dollar amount for the damage in the house to fix?
75,000?
And then you include the truck,
Yeah. So it was up there.
over $100,000.
Yeah. So it's just, it's just a matter of once you get the water out of there and you get it drained properly, it's going to be draining into the driving range, Little Miami River. So
Where it's supposed to go.
yeah, so it needs to get to the river and down the road. But to get it there, we get these 3, 4 foot high waters and raining 8 inches in an hour or two. A lot of water. So yeah, so it's just disappointing that that the water gets that high. Everybody's like, my God, you got lakefront property. It's. But I love Bellbrook. I'm here. I'll be here probably 10 more years. So that's all I got.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
And just so everybody also follows up and knows, and as Mr. Bucklow pointed out, we've had an engineer team come out and already study that area in preparation. We knew that was a problem area. We knew that was a priority. And even before the acknowledgement of ARPA funds, we'd already discussed that and including some sort of action into the capital for this year. So this just helps bolster that idea. So they're in the process of designing some potential options for improvements down there, and we'll see what they come up with, and we'll hopefully be able to put those into projects and into action. So
When will you have shovels on the ground on this?
no idea. I wouldn't be able to make a guess on that right now.
So we could be a flood or two down the road still?
Yeah, depends on what happens with the weather here coming into the spring. There's all sorts of variables to that. Supplies of the pipes, the mobility of workforces, bidding the project, all those things. So unfortunately, that does take a little bit of time, but we've hopefully got a jump start on it with the engineers have already been out and surveyed things, and they'll be coming back with some recommendations and a design, and we'll get going, hopefully.
And Rob, the Rescue Act money has to be spent by what, the end of 2024, correct?
Yes. Yes.
So by then at least.
Yes. Absolutely.
In the meantime, would it make sense to have sandbags stored somewhere for use if it does happen? Or does that really help?
I can check with the county emergency management and see what type of supplies that they have.
I mean, until we get a permanent solution,
Mm-hmm.
anything that.
Are we the only street that that happens to in Bellbrook?
So that level,
4 feet.
4 feet of water, I've not heard that high, yes.
About 5 feet of water, cars got stuck,
Yeah.
and it washed the bridge partially out, which was quickly repaired by our service department. But the nice thing
We have spent money to do.
Recently, they did do something at the end of our street. Dug it up and allowed, I think it was the pipe that just couldn't take the water out. That they enlarged that, the whole area there by the road. And I'll be honest with you, we've not had that much of flooding since that's happened, but to reinsure, but I thought about getting, sandbags just to put in front of my house. If I know 10 inches of rain's coming, we're gonna have 5 feet of water and it's gonna be up to the door. So I think that would help me if I have another claim, that I took measures to, but with the city doing that new pipe system down that street, I think that'd take care of it. Get it to the river and out.
Next. Yeah,
okay.
sure.
It's kind of along the same theme. TJ Hope, 3833 Chablis Court. Since the discussion has mainly been around water management and those types of issues, with the money being divided from Bellbrook to Sugar Creek Township, surrounding communities, if there is a concerted effort to address this issue, it's obviously not just a Bellbrook issue. Whatever is done, I think there could be some advantage to coordinating with surrounding organizations, surrounding municipalities, even at the county level, state level, considering the intensity of events in this local area. So that's all. I do just want to cite the two other projects that I could think of is the Little Sugar Creek restoration, but I think there's alternative funding options for that, maybe. And then there is the need for a firehouse, a new firehouse. That's been a need for years. There are some operational deficiencies within that current facility, and I know the city collected an estimate that was a price tag on the order of $3 million. But I know from our fire department, they've been doing an exceptional job for quite a long time, absent some resources. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, TJ. We are looking at Little Sugar Creek. We can't, we're not gonna forget about that, trust me.
Yeah, sure. Yep.
My name is Wendy Dyer. I live at 3813 Callaway Court. And actually, I just want to follow up on what these gentlemen have talked about. Flooding is a huge problem in Bellbrook because we are at the bottom of the bowl. And as opposed to dealing with individual flooding issues, one of the things I'd like to, and the Little Miami Watershed Network would like to suggest, is that instead of dealing with these point problems, is that we deal with some of the larger issue. And one of the larger issues is the ponds, all these man-made ponds that we have. They were built going back 40s, 50s, 60s. I don't know how far they go back in Bellbrook, but They were done to standards that were relevant at the time before we had so much hardscaping, before when Sugar Creek was almost just farms, before there were different federal regulations. Originally they were about controlling water. Now ponds are also used as a way to protect the environment against nutrients and things like that. So our suggestion would be that, one, you do work with Sugar Creek Township, Greene County, and do some type of assessment of all of these ponds. Many of them have been abandoned, essentially. They are built by the developers hand them off to a homeowners association, and 20 years later, that homeowners association has basically fallen apart. And it is the responsibility of that group of homeowners, but they don't even know that. And I don't have the site, but I actually was reading that often, even the modern day ones that have been built in the last 5 years, those are the amount of extra space. If it needs to be 10 feet deep, they make it 12 feet deep, so then because it has to be at least 10. It's already 11 feet by the time the developers are moved out of there. So just the stuff that comes from the developers digging foundations takes up half the useful life of a pond. So these are they're all over. They're not necessarily being maintained. I don't know what the city has done to locate them, to check on them, but our suggestion as the Little Miami Watershed Network is that you do work with the surrounding townships and communities and if possible, Greene County, and do some type of assessment and try to really address those issues, because those can also be the reason he's getting water in his, because they're not deep enough, they're putting too much in there too fast. There's just so many issues that could be addressed by addressing these ponds. They also, when they're basically overflowing, the water flows too fast into the river. They do damage to the riverbank. Some of which could be addressed by planting native plants along the riverbank. But they take out the trees. They end up, you end up with all kinds of branches down there. It's just a vicious cycle that because the water is coming. If they're not working properly, the water is coming out much faster than it's supposed to. So that would be my suggestion. And the Little Miami Watershed's suggestion. We wrote up a statement. If you'd all like a copy of it, we can get it to we can send it to you.
Send it to the city if you can, please.
What?
Send it to the city if you can.
Okay.
Rob, you can put it on the website.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for the input, and we are watching some of the ponds. I know these detention ponds were the best thing since sliced bread when they first came out, but I know a lot of them have not been maintained. We've got 1 or 2 ponds we're watching currently
But it's just, and I guess my thing is I hate for us to wait until they're causing a problem. It would be nice if because many of them are causing problems. We're just because there's not water in the neighbor's yard yet, and we have no idea how many, I asked somebody in my neighborhood, and because I haven't been there that long, and they said ours actually did have to be maintained, but, people don't know how deep they're supposed to be. They're not sure, and the people that are responsible, you move away. The person who's in charge of the homeowners association moves away, and it's not by any fault of any. But so that would be our suggestion.
I have a question.
Okay.
So, are you talking about retention ponds, or are you talking about ponds that maintain water on a continuous basis?
Both of them. They both cause problems. They both. My portion of the neighborhood holds water all the time. My neighbor's portion, or the neighborhood next to us, has one that empties. But there's just and there's so both of them.
Particular problem.
Well, when they fill up too fast, and then when they're filling up too fast, and these heavy rain bomb storms that we get, the water just comes rushing out of them. And goes off into the creek and into the creeks, and they destroy the riverbed and stuff like that. And also, if they were the proper depth, they would slow down a little bit, and the water wouldn't necessarily get to his house quite so fast.
Okay, so your primary suggestion is the ponds that
To slow it down. The original intention of them was to slow them down, and because of the amount of, well, like my neighborhood was built 20 years ago. How many neighborhoods have been built north of it, or, up in Sugar Creek and stuff, and all of that hardscaping, puts more and more stress on the river downstream. So even if mine was enough, and it's working properly for what it was when it was built 20 years ago, does not mean the river or the creek that it flows to can handle it anymore, because the one upstream that may be working properly is now putting water in faster, because it puts it all in there so much faster than nature would when we have all that hardscaping.
I was just trying to wrap my head around.
But that's not necessarily, I don't know what the suggestion is. My thing is we need to go find out how deep they are. Are they deep as they should be? Are they clogged up? There's so many issues with them. And as far as I can tell, it's upon the homeowners until it ends up in his yard. It's upon the homeowners to take care of keeping their pond clean. But if they don't even know that their pond is a problem, how would they? They didn't even know they're responsible. Yeah.
So I would guess if you asked the homeowner, they would not refer to it as pond.
Right.
Even when it rains hard, there's
And I will tell you where I used to live, the pond got emptied, and we had people that planted trees in it and stuff, because it was just pretty in their backyard, and it never seemed to be filled. And then we had a 500-year rain, and the people that lived behind them ended up with 3-4 feet of rain in their basement. So and that's the only reason we knew that it wasn't deep enough anymore, is that it. So I don't know what the answer is. My concern is that we don't even know where the problem's coming from. And this would be, the idea here would be to try to find how much of a problem this is. People are actually doing a great job. I doubt it, but it would be that it's not a problem, but we don't seem to have any type of assessment system to assess it. And until we have those systems, and Sugar Creek has those systems, and the county as a whole has those systems, then we don't know how big the problem is and how much is causing his,
I think part of what you're getting at, talking about the ones that are dry, ones that are wet, natural,
could be.
on whatever the once these retention ponds are put in, there is absolutely zero oversight for maintaining them. So we've got a retention pond that's 5-10 acres, and it's supposed to be 12 or 14 feet deep. What no one knows is it's really 6 feet deep. This is the problem. So until we get someone that actually monitors, or there's an actual ordinance that someone is responsible for going out, it's not hard to go out and see how deep the bottom is. Okay, it's not 12 or 14 feet like dredge it out today. That would I think this is the problem that I think the only way that those ponds that are, I'm not talking
inspections. In our case, we're at the bottom of the bowl. We really do want to work with our surrounding community because, just because, if possible, I mean, can't make Sugar Creek work with you, but we can fix some of our ponds, upriver ones. And like I said, some of it can even not be a problem with it may be functioning the way it should, or the way it was designed to do. But one, regulations changed in 2000, that there are other things that these ponds actually serve. And then, like I said, there is so much more hardscaping than there was when some of these were, even mine that's only from basically 2000, or exactly when. But even if they're functioning, there's so much more hardscaping, and all that hardscaping puts more and more pressure on the river. And as the river, so mine may need to be deeper than it did because the river gets fuller at those times. These storms, what used to be. We get a lot of 100-year storms. We get a lot of 100-year storms, and so you see people losing their property values, and they can be dangerous, and it's not good for our environment because all that stuff going in there, all that stuff rushing in there brings with it the nutrient load and just a variety of things. So I don't know how big the problem is, and none of you know how big the problem is, but until we research it. So my thought was that we come up with a way to start trying to identify the problem.
Absolutely.
I can give you some assurance that we do work with the other communities, surrounding communities, especially upriver. I'm on the executive committee for the Green County Regional Planning, and anytime we review a new development, those are the first words out of my mouth.
Good to hear.
20 years ago, they changed the way they manage this. And prior to 20 years ago, or more than 20 years ago, really where a lot of the problems coming, I actually spoke directly to the commissioners and suggested that there's a possibility that the rules that are in place right now aren't even adequate, because I brought to the attention some of the most recent floods we've had here in Bellbrook, explained to them, hey, we're at the lowest point of the county, and if we don't do something about it, maybe even further than what is expected of us, we're going to be bailed out because it's going to get worse and worse and worse. So we're very active in making sure that we are heard with developments in the county.
Okay.
Thank you. Just a little bit of information. We have identified one particular, we'll call it a pond, a retention pond in a neighborhood that was believed to cause some issues. So when the engineer inspected it, although depth can have something to do with it, oftentimes, according to them, that it's really not. It's how the outflow is managed. So in this particular case, the outflow, it needs to slow down. So whether you surround some riprap to slow the flow of the water down as it goes, because the water is going to flow, whether even the pond floods and fills over or goes around it or something. So the idea is to slow that water down, so it's more than just the pond. And we're hopefully going to be working with that particular residential area and present our findings of that and work with them to get that one piece solved. So, and the approach of not just the pond, but what happens downstream from that, and slowing the fall all the way through that creek bed or whatever it might be that leads into Dots Market's parking lot or down to Hillside, that the more outflows of those that we can control and slow down, the better. So that's another point. But we have started that on at least one of the ponds, and we'll continue to identify the problem areas and address it, and then get into prevention for sure.
Thanks, Ron.
All right.
Next.
I just have a question. Is there a draft spend plan or a target plan that you already have right now, or are you starting from scratch?
I guess in the form of a draft, there has been an allocation of the funds distributed to us so far, half of them. And we've taken and divided that up for a percentage of capital projects. And that's about as far as the spending plan goes. Identifying actual projects within that capital allowance is what's going to transpire out of beginning with this session and further discussion.
Communities, the condominium communities have a fee for maintenance. My understanding that shouldn't part of that fee be in maintaining any basin, whatever, that property, doesn't that occur?
Certainly, HOAs and all that is usually their responsibility. The issue with that is, as the lady pointed out, is sometimes as neighborhoods age, people come and go, people don't know what maybe should have been done, maybe bylaws and regulations aren't inspected and updated, and that's part of that assessment that she talked about that we're trying to do to identify some of the aged areas that perhaps some of the attention to those have been overlooked as time has gone on, and reintroduce the responsibilities to that and make sure that they have HOAs, solvent HOAs, and to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, the developer promises this is gonna be maintained, and da-da-da-da. Developer's gone, and that property's sold, now they're in charge. And is it being maintained? I'd like to say, does anybody even know they're supposed to maintain it?
In some cases, maybe not. Right, you're exactly right.
Neighborhoods that had associations, they either never got fully incorporated to whatever level they were supposed to be, or they just dwindle away because everybody was willing somebody else. They moved and nobody else would take the job.
On address the negative economic impacts, can any of this money be used to acquire either commercial property here in the city proper for economic developments?
I don't believe so. It would be for improvements to facilities that provide services and things like that, but just to acquire property for economic development purposes, I'm not certain that the city would be. There's a possibility that up the scale of the allocations, there could be grants for organizations or people that would seek to do that for the purposes.
Referring to as the old that is sitting basically vacant. It's the Ohio State Auditor's Office recommended to the school district that they get rid of that building. It's money loser, the rents aren't even covering costs, but I was wondering if that money could be used to work with the school district to acquire that building and improve it for those tenants that are already there, but then also for the development of that property, which would have a big economic impact for downtown Bellbrook.
Yeah, not being an expert, but our allocation, and for our operations, likely not. But like I said, maybe a higher up allocation of that possibly could be.
Hi, my name is Kelsey Hobert. I live at 3323 Stutzman Road, but I work at the Bellbrook Sugar Creek Community Support Center, which is in the old school building. So we are a super active, really, really busy organization. We're providing food to around 50 families every single week. We are providing support groups. We're doing life skills education classes. We are providing household necessities, emergency clothing, volunteer opportunities, and tremendous support for the community. As Matt gave me permission, right after his flood, he called us, and we were the ones who were able to provide emergency items to his family in that moment of need. We also get calls all the time from people in the community who have eviction notices, who have disconnect notices, and are scrambling because of economic impacts, lasting economic impacts from COVID-19. So I totally am supportive of all of the infrastructure and drainage conversation that's been happening here. That's so important. But I do want to say on behalf of the people who have had really difficult impacts from COVID-19 and who have been out of jobs, who have been gotten really, really sick, and those people are still struggling. And so if there's any impact, any allocation of funds that could go to continue to helping the people in our community who have really been negatively impacted, we would really appreciate it, because we are still busy, we're still right there, feeling the pulse of that part of the community. And also thank you all for the support that you provided us thus far. We are very grateful.
Thank you, Kelsey.
I just wanted to say they have an outstanding and amazing team of people that are helping a lot of people in this community, and you know, I just want to say they're just awesome. I mean, I've delivered beds and stuff for them, but they just get all kinds of stuff and they allocate it all over the place. But it is very amazing what they're doing for the community.
And we recognize that too. We gave them an allocation of some of our CARES Act monies. We were trying to keep it in the back of our mind, and you're the one big charity, charitable organization in the city, so you have our attention.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
To that point, what small businesses have been impacted, and how are you addressing maybe their support?
Yeah, I'm Jo Beth Bryant. I own Crafters Lodge, which is down beside El Toro. As most of you know, at the beginning of COVID, most stores were told to close. And so we did for quite a while. We tried to do, curbside delivery and door delivery, but, fabric doesn't sell over the internet that well. People like to touch it, they like to see it, they need to hear it. Then my rent went up. So, new owner, feeling out in California, and so rent went up. I can't afford that place anymore. I need to move. Another meeting that some information, and I have talked with Greg Dart, who owns the Penwick building, as you all know, and I know everybody's really anxious to get that building up and renovated and have something in it. And so what Greg and I want to do is renovate the building, turn the downstairs around back where the big garage doors are into what's called a maker space. And this would be a nonprofit. And it would teach carpentry skills. It would teach different arts, what we call messy arts, painting, pottery, metalworking, carpentry, woodworking, things that are not being taught in our schools anymore. Used to at shop class. And the other thing would be like basic DIY kind of stuff for a home. As a realtor, I was a realtor a while back. I had so many clients that would walk into a house and go, well, I can't buy this house, I don't like the paint color. I'm like, honey, you just go get a can of paint and you get a roller and you paint the walls. They don't know how. We have an entire generation of 20 to 30 somethings that have never held a paintbrush in their hands. They don't have these skills, and these are the kinds of skills our makerspace would be teaching. Upstairs is where I would move into with my shop, but we also want to put a coffee shop in the front. And we'd have an area up there so that we could have maybe book readings, small lectures, things of that nature. And then towards the back, in the extension, basically, is where I would be able to have my shop. And so it would, if we could get some funding to help renovate that building, which I know everybody wants, then we serve the community by teaching them some basic skills, basic life skills that they need. We help a small business out because then I get to move into a place I can afford. And we add another business, which is going to have to hire employees, to run the coffee shop, and we're hoping that once everything's up and running, that we can also have some local beers and wines in the coffee shop as well. So that's our dream for the building. And right now, we're just trying to look for funding. We've talked to a grant writer, and he gave us this list a mile long of things that we have to have for him to even start. You know, every
So
day.
after your initial funding, so you're gonna be sustained through grants?
Well, the makerspace would continue to be sustained through grants and through the fees that we would charge different artisans or to come in. We'd have teachers in there, but we'd also be able to rent out the space for artists. For a potter to have a wheel house, that's a big. Now who's doing that? Her shed in her backyard. Have her wheel and everything. Not everybody can do that. And, don't know that. One of the first things to go, art and music. First two things that they cut. So now you might have an art class, but it's limited. You know, the scope of it is going to be very limited now. So that's a gap that we can fill, even for our high school and middle school students. They do this downtown. Some of the schools actually send their students, I can't think of the name of the place, but it's right downtown. If you're driving down, it's all painted up and everything.
It's K-12 at the corner of Jefferson and Patterson.
Yes. There are high schools that send their students there for art class because they can't have it in their high school or they just don't have it. Yes?
That's a great idea, but the problem Greg Dart has had is parking. Where's everybody gonna park?
You know what?
There's no parking.
We're not gonna worry about parking. People can walk.
My next question opposed to that is the house they tore down next to Dollar General there. Somebody said they're making that a parking lot for the community. Is that right? Or
No, that is not correct.
No, they're gonna build a condo there or something. or another
Yeah,
house.
they're gonna build new homes there. Mhm.
Oh, they are? Okay.
That's correct.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not worried about parking.
Yeah, I
You know
mean-
what? People will walk.
They'll get there.
Like where I am now,
Build it, they'll come.
if you walk from the other side of the parking lot into my store, that's no different than walking from down the sidewalk. Down to the store.
Yeah, the
It's-
parking is, but.
And if I could reel this back into the original point.
I think that I'm all for, there's no one that's more for development in Bellbrook. But I think that business development, especially something like this, the parking is gonna be the number one failure for anything that goes in that building. Regardless of how enthusiastic we are about what we're trying to do, it has to be addressed. I think that not addressing that people are gonna walk there, I think is a problem. And I think that looking for someone else to develop the developer's building, I think is also a mistake.
Well, we did the streetscape study, and that certainly has revealed some parking information and studies, and we'll continue to look at that and implement and improve where we can. But back to the original question about like small business assistance that the gentleman asked. The purpose of the money really is focused to help mitigate some financial struggles, like maintaining employees, paying employee benefits, handling rent and or mortgage payments to maintain the business to actually stay open. And not necessarily for expansions or renovations or new things. There is grants for that, and work with us, and we can help guide some resources and look forward to the opportunities for some local development grants to assist in that. But if the businesses have issues where they are struggling, in making those payrolls, maintaining their employees. Maybe some employees might be working on compensatory time and, maybe haven't been paid or something. Those are the high priorities for the expense of this money. I think that the business community in Bellbrook has gone through and is in the middle still of a recovery, certainly, but others have been hit worse, but some have it better for certain. But we do want to look at creating either a loan or a forgivable loan program, depending on the concept, for businesses that are still having issues, and help mitigating some of their financial crises if they still are in that post, to make sure to keep them in operation and viable here in Bellbrook. So that'll be part of that, an examination and reaching out to the businesses to see which ones do need that, because there are some that might be back on rent, that might need to look at making a decision as to pay employees, pay rent, and
Part of the ARPA program or a different program?
no, through this. That would be.
Forgivable loans through an ARPA program?
You can, yes. That is something that can be done. Can be done.
Let's put it to you this way. I just refinanced my house. I had to take money out to pay back rent. And I still don't have money.
Well, we need to have a conversation as we identify the allocation within our allotment when we get the second tranche, and see what we can do going into the year to have some opportunities. For
Were
sure.
you able to get some of the grant money from Greene County? I know Rick's in the back room, but Greene County had a grant program with the CARES money, and I know a lot of our downtown residents and businesses took advantage of that.
I got none. I have applied for everything.
Yeah, like I said, you need to get with us. We've got knowledge of the resources, especially for projects like that, new projects, existing business growth, retention and expansion. Mainly with retention and things like that. So, get with us. Yep, follow up with us. We're here to help.
That you shared with me that I think maybe crowd missed here was the way your business works. Is you hold events, and a large portion of your yearly revenue came in, or used to come in through events that
Through
you
events.
hold, that you were unable to hold due to COVID for 2 years.
Even my classes now are much, much smaller because I can't hold the events. Usually I have 2 large events during the year. My biggest seller are my sewing machines. I sell $16,000 sewing machines. I'm an embroidery machine. Well, that's my major income for the whole year. Those events. I haven't had one for 2 years. So that hurts a lot. I can have little classes, 10, 12 people at the most. And that's pushing it. Where I used to have 50, 75. I'd sell 6 machines. Sell $16,000 machines in one weekend. That's a big part of my revenue.
Thank you for the input. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Now I have to get home and take care of my dog.
I gotta run too, but you mentioned sandbags. I talked to the engineer when he came down Lower Hillside Drive there. And I mentioned to him, how much would be a pump and a big hose just to pump it out of that cul-de-sac? Can we be prepared for something like that if we know it's coming, or,
We'll have to see if that's effective for something like that. But
yeah,
they're examining a lot of
There's
stuff
no
for
question
immediate
about it.
response and long-term stuff. So, sure. And real quick, back to the parking issue. Part of this funding also has to do with our infrastructure, our surface and our transportation things. We have the walkability study. We also have the streetscape study that addresses some parking and some flow and some safety-related issues. That in combination with some grants at the county and the state that we're hopeful to receive an award, that we can use some of these funds to help augment that, to kind of expand the use of this money and make it go a little bit further to help address some of those things like the parking and the and the walking and stuff like that, so. We look forward to that.
Absolutely. Anyone else care to speak? Just about an hour, we'll run a few extra minutes here, give you a chance, there's really many folks here.
Denny Bennett, 2211 Shadowwood Circle. I think water management has always been a problem in Bellbrook, and I would say that would be a top priority.
Sure.
Water management in Bellbrook. Like, I couldn't even go to the Spring Valley Bikeway today on 725. It was closed, flooded. Anyway, I'm going to say about 10 years ago, Michael probably remember this, we had a gal who walked around Bellbrook. She was gone all day walking, named Kathy. Her name was Kathy, I forget her last name, lived up at Magnetic Springs. And you'd see her walking, and you probably remember this, Elaine. Oh, is that right? Oh my gosh. Anyway, this gal would walk around Bellbrook, and she would have 4 or 5 Kroger bags in her pocket. She'd pick up trash. And she'd have bags of trash, everybody saw. In fact, when I was on city council, I gave her an award.
Yeah, absolutely.
We did. Anyway, I would like to see, and you see all kind of people walking around Bellbrook anyway. So I would like to see the city of Bellbrook possibly do an initiative of people who walk around Bellbrook anyway, maybe give them a little stipend to pick up trash. Now, for example, my wife, Carol, we live 1 mile from the library. She walked down to the library, got a book, picked up a Kroger bag on the way out of the gutter, and picked up an entire Kroger bag full of trash 1 mile from the library back to our house. We live off Vemco. And that's incredible. So anyway, I know this is nothing as big as water management or anything like that, but I think it would make Bellbrook look a little better, having somebody or a couple people walk around Bellbrook and pick up trash.
Part of our streetscape plan, we do have some money in there for some trash receptacles in the downtown area. But again, this is litter, I'm not sure if that's gonna make a difference, but we are looking at adding additional trash receptacles downtown.
Well,
I've picked up trash along Little Sugar Creek before. I think if we maybe stop selling alcohol and cigarettes too, that's a phenomenon.
I wanted to recognize Barb. She's one of my neighbors. She's constantly walking through Bellbrook, and she picks up trash.
Really?
They recognized her.
There's
Her name's
a lot
Barb.
Yeah, there's people around.
She's a writer. She's a trash grabber.
Anyway, that's just my little lame idea.
Okay, Danny, thanks.
Thank you, Jim.
Great idea.
Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
That also adds into the fact that all that trash won't get into the storm drain and stop them up.
Good evening. Sorry you got jumped in front of me. That's all right. Snuck in on you.
Hi there, I'm Don Walsh, 5401 Silbury Lane in Dayton, Washington Township, but I've been attached at the hip to 71 and 73 South Main for the last 30 or 35 years. I sent an email with some pictures of flooding there late this afternoon, and I thought I'd just read part of the email here and try to make it quick. Let me skip all the kudos to myself on how I try to maintain the old house that was built in 1913 and was added on to in the 40s and in the 1990s when I renovated it. In the 1990s, there was a major flood there. Residents were wading through waist-deep rushing waters in the street in the middle of the night, trying to evacuate everyone and their pets. Major losses were incurred. Floodwaters entered homes and basements filled to the ceiling. Once the waters subsided and the cleanup began, FEMA arrived and set up a tent in the front of my property at 7173 South Main and offered water and food and support to the residents and homeowners. We were told at that time this was a once in a 100-year flood. Unfortunately, it was not. In the past 5 years, there have been 3 similar events in the old village, not quite as severe. I did send a couple of photos. in the most recent event, which was in March of 2020, that I recall, water entered the home next door to mine and was inches from the threshold of 71 and 73. So stormwater arrives at that location directly down the hill, as well as rushing down Southeast Street, past the post office, the fire station, and the old schoolhouse. The little Sugar Creek used to leave its banks more often, but it does still overflow in areas down there. So, as far as I know, storm sewers in the old village part of Bellbrook are minimal. After the 1990, and I'm not sure what year exactly that was, that flood, there was a major redo of the storms along South Main Street. They were installed or upgraded or both. But I remember at the time asking why such small pipe was being used. It's either a 12, I think it's a 16-inch pipe that handles all the water coming down South Main Street, and as I understand it, it is directed to nowhere. It ends in a culvert next to South Main Street. It's caused damage to homes and vehicles. It's unfortunate the neighbors next to me whose home was inundated with flood water had just purchased that property and moved in with like 6 months earlier. They had major. So I could go on, which I said right here, but here's my list of things that would help mitigate that problem. Unfortunately, the $700,000 has already been spent on some pretty good ideas here. So, but I really think that I'll just read these points. Complete upgrade and enlargement of existing storm sewers and catch basins along South Main Street. Additional storm sewers and catch basins on the feeder streets like Southeast and East-South streets. The names of streets in the old village are a little bit confusing, of course. Dredging of the Little Sugar Creek. I'm not an engineer, so I'm not sure what I'm talking about here, but it feels like what should happen, especially east of South Main and Waynesville after it crosses under Waynesville Road. It seems when you look out there, it's the riverbed itself is just flattened out. But also, if we could somehow routing the water directly to the stream underground as possible, out all the way through the soccer fields to the Little Sugar Creek. And then my first point was brought up town.
Send that email to if I read my email, sure. Will you regularly now, and I'm glad to know that you're all aware of it. Hopefully you can read that, Rob at cityofbellbrook.org. Sure, thanks, Rob. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Appreciate it, thank you. In particular, on your comment, the drainage that goes south of town, when it goes into the stream, believe it or not, there's a one-way valve that only lets water come from the city into the stream and not let water come from the stream backwards.
We're at the very bottom of the bottom.
Bottom of the bottom.
Bottom of the bowl.
Does anyone else care to speak tonight? That being said, I want to thank you for the input. Certainly very informative. Obviously, we know we've got water issues to deal with, and that's something we've known about for a while. I think that's something we're going to be spending a fair amount of this money on, and it's just how to spend it best and what projects come up first. And we've had engineers looking at water problems before. We've looked at some of the detention ponds before. So we've got those things out there. We know there's a lot of roads that have a lot of water. I think we have water on, I think at Bemco at one point in time, we had water down there too. The story we had June the 18th was just a mess all over town, so we're very much aware of it. We have countless photographs and just keeps informed. We have problems, but once again, thanks for your input. I thought it was very informative. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming.
Good meeting.
Dude, how are you doing?